Hey guys, this is Smithy. Welcome to my channel. In today's video, we're going to talk about duping Pat Mcgrath, the newest palette, which is Mothership 9 Huetopian Dream Palette. Now, I know this has created so much buzz over the internet, and I can understand both the sides, I would say, because the palette is beautiful. Let me start off with that. I absolutely loved the color story in the palette, but I also understand the promo pictures do not translate in the palette, and I think that's for a reason, because Pat Mcgrath knows her audience pretty well. If she does create like a rainbow palette, it would not go out with like a mass audience. But talking about that, are those shades in my collection? Absolutely yes. If you are any kind of a makeup collector, I would say, and if you love pinks and purples, you almost have everything in your collection. So that's exactly what we are going to do. We're going to dupe Pat Mcgrath, the newest palette, Huetopian Dream Palette, with the colors that I have in my collection. I know I'm missing two shades. I have it in another palette. So let's dive right into the video and do live swatches on how I created my version of Huetopian Dream Palette. So yeah, if you guys are interested, let's begin the video. Now, before beginning the video, I also wanted to mention I have a mix of Sydney Grace single shadows as well as Colourpop shadows and JD Glow shadows. And I also have Pat Mcgrath's The Sublime palette, the smaller one. Now, if you guys do not want to invest in single shadows, and if you do have the Sigma's Warm Neutrals palette as well as the Break the Rules palette, you can still get a similar effect of those shadows from these palettes also. So I'm going to just give you a bunch of shadow recommendations which can create a similar look, similar to the newest Pat Mcgrath palette. But first, let's dive right into the Pat Mcgrath palette. The Pat Mcgrath Mothership 9 palette retails at $125, which is a huge investment even if you are like a big makeup lover, and I am an eyeshadow palette collector, I would say. When I saw the palette, I immediately was drawn towards the palette, but I also knew at the back of the mind that I do have all these shadows in my collection. There were a lot of DMs that came into my Instagram saying, Smithy, the palette is beautiful, please help me not buy it, where is your dupe video? And that is why I created this video. So yeah, let's just dive right in. Let's start off with the Sigma's Warm Neutrals palette. Now, if you do have this palette, the second shade, which is Charmer from the palette, is that champagne pinky shimmer from the palette. The similar shade to that would also be the Ringer shadow from the Colourpop palette, that also has like a slight pinkish champagne shade. I'm going to swatch Charmer just because why not? And I'm gonna do it here. So let's start off. So that is the shade called Charmer, which is more of that champagne pink shade. And I will do like a close-up swatches video in the outside lighting also. This is, by the way, natural lighting. I do not film in the artificial lighting at all. So whatever you see in my videos is all from the natural lighting. So this is the shade Charmer, which is being duped for the shade Skin Show Nude Ecstasy from the Pat Mcgrath palette. Now let's move on to the second shade, which is Secret Eden. And this is being duped with a shade called Adore Me from the Sydney Grace palette. And again, we are looking for like a mauvey tone shadow, but it definitely is a little more deeper rather than a typical mauve shade, I would say. So if you see in the Warm Neutrals palette, this is also a mauve shade, which is called Passion Fruit. And even this one is a russet shade, which is also a mauve shade. The mauve shade that she has in her palette is like right in the middle of these two. And that's why I'm taking the Sydney Grace shadow, which is in the shade Adore Me. So let me swatch that. I actually do want to swatch in the same placement as she has swatched it so that I can show you side by side. So yeah, we'll go back to another shade, I would say. But this is the shade which is called Adore Me from the Sydney Grace palette, which dupes the shade called Secret Eden from the Pat Mcgrath palette. Now let's move on to the shade that I actually missed, which is called Extreme Plum Noir, and this is more of like a burgundy brown shade which is being duped by this shade from the Warm Neutrals palette, and the shade name is called Chills. Another shade that is very similar to that is called Chocolate Raspberry Fudge from the Sydney Grace single eyeshadow. I mean, both of them are very similar. We are looking for like a deep plummy brown shade. So I'm gonna take Chills from the Warm Neutrals palette. I'm gonna swatch it right in the center because that's where Pat Mcgrath has swatched it. Right there. Can you see that? It's a very beautiful plummy brown. Now let's move on to another shimmer shadow which is called Cosmic Bloom, and this is like a deeper warm pink shimmer, and it has some kind of a duochrome flip to it, and I thought the shade that perfectly matches it is the shade called Golden Rose from Sydney Grace, and this definitely has like that duochrome effect with a gold as well as a rose shade, which is very similar to the shade which is called Cosmic Bloom in her palette. So let me swatch it right here. Look at that shadow. I mean, these Sydney Grace shadows are like so beautiful. I love this. I mean, the color combo is beautiful. We cannot deny that at all. The next shade in the palette is called Bronze Desire, and this is more of like that bronzy shade but with like a pink rosy undertone to it, and the shade that I am duping it with is called High Strung from Colourpop. And I think I have a lot of bronzes in my collection, and a similar shadow to this would be the shade called Beaming from the Warm Neutrals palette, but I think Beaming is a tiny little bit on like more of a taupey side, but this is more of the bronzy side. So I'm gonna do that. I mean, look at that. It's stunning. I'm not sure that you can catch it in the lighting or not. Let me just build it up a tiny little bit. Can you see that? It's a bronze but with a pink in it. I love this color story, man. Wow, I love it. Okay, let's move on to the next shadow, and the next shadow is called Shockwave, which is more of like a corally shade. It's a coral orange, so this is the most punchy shade in the palette. I'm going to dupe this with Wait For It from Colourpop, and this is more of that corally orange shade. I'm going to swatch that right there, and this would give us that punch. And these are all like one swipe swatches. Love it. Love the color story so far. Let's move on. The next shade in the palette, I'm looking here because my laptop is open here, okay? The next shade in the palette is called Bronze Solaris 005. Now this is more of a golden shade. In the palette, it looks like yellow gold, but I saw a lot of people like live swatching it, and it is more of like a bronzy gold, I would say. So I'm going to dupe it with the Sublime eyeshadow palette from Pat Mcgrath. The shade that I'm going to use in place of that is called Sextrovert, and this is much more gold rather than it shows in the pan. So wait for it. And you cannot deny, I mean, Pat Mcgrath shadows are stunning. But if you feel like it's more of a yellow gold, I mean, there's one gold shadow in every Pat Mcgrath shadows. If you do not own any Pat Mcgrath shadows, there's a gold shade in the Corderosa palette which would come very similar to that. Now let's move on to the next shade, which is called Blitz Sex, and this is a duochrome which is more of like a maroon shade but has like a green gold shift to it, and I thought that this shade would be extremely similar, and this is the shade called Corruption from the palette, and this is the same Sublime palette. And this palette, I think on their website is $14. I'll put it on the screen for you guys. You need this. I have been raving about this palette for so long. If you guys watch my videos, you know that I love that palette. I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but can you see the shift happening? It's a very beautiful maroon with like a green shift. I hope that you guys can see it. I love this. I absolutely love this shade. Look at that. Okay, now let's move on to the special shades in the palette, which is Astral Venetian Orchid. I mean, her names are stunning and very hard to pronounce. I'm going to dupe this with the JD Glow shadow in the shade called Sin. Now, you guys know, I've said this a million times on my channel, that the JD Glow Galaxy shadows dupe Pat Mcgrath Astral shadows, Astral Blitz shadows. And look at that. Oh my god, this is stunning. Let's say if you do not have the JD Glow Sin eyeshadow with you, and you do have a Mreezy palette, the shade which is called Barb is very, very similar to that. So if you do have this, you still do have that shadow in your collection. Now let's move on to the last shade, which is called Astral Amethyst Moon, which is that beautiful duochrome purpley pinky shade. And this I'm going to dupe it with the shade Anomaly. Now this also has a duochrome effect with like purple and pink. Can you see that? Let me just take it out and show it to you. So it has a purple and a pink duochrome. Can you see that? Oh my god, I love this shadow so much. But let's say if you do not own that shadow, and if you do have Break the Rules palette, which I have raved so many times on my channel, the shade which is called Go Rouge right in the middle is very, very similar to the shade which is called Astral Amethyst Moon. So I'm gonna do JD Glow shadow right there. Oh my god, look at that. And that's like one swipe. I can definitely build it up. I mean, you get the gist. Oh wow, it's just stunning. Look at that. And that is my version of the Pat Mcgrath Huetopian Dream Palette. You guys let me know how you feel about it. I'm going to give you a close-up of all these swatches in the natural lighting. I feel $125 is quite a bit of a money investment for an eyeshadow palette, and that's the main reason why I dupe these shadows. Now, if I would get this palette for $30-40, would I get it? Absolutely. Even if I do have duplicates in my collection, I might, because I know Pat Mcgrath eyeshadows are absolutely wonderful, but these are wonderful because of that Blitz Astral formula, which you can easily get using the JD Glow shadows and its Bell Cosmetics palette. Let me quickly go over the things that I have on my eyes and my face. On my eyes, I do have Sin in the inner corner. I have Anomaly in the center of my eyelid, and right in the center I have Golden Rose from Sydney Grace right in the center, and I deepen the outer corners with the shade from Sigma Warm Neutrals palette, burgundy shade which is called Chills here, and for my inner corners I applied Charmer mixed with the shade called Sextrovert in the inner corners, and that's my final look on the eyes. For my lips, I just finished it off with my Pat Mcgrath gloss in the shade Wicked Whisper, and for the blush I have Pat Mcgrath's Cherish on my face. Now I want to make it pretty clear, by no means am I saying not to buy Pat Mcgrath eyeshadow. It's your money. You should know where you need to spend it. If you love to invest in Pat Mcgrath eyeshadow, I mean, go for it. I am pretty sure her eyeshadow formulas would be absolutely great, because I do have her Bronze Seduction palette with me, which I absolutely love. But if you did want to save some money, these are my options, what I created for creating the Huetopian Dream Palette. So yes, that's all for today, guys. If you did like this video, if you found this helpful, if I could save you some money, do give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell so that you're notified every time that I post next. I generally upload every Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays at 9 AM Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!